Welcome to episode 102 of On My Studio Table. I'm so glad you could join me, and I hope you're inspired by some of the things I'm sharing with you today. The photographs that I shared at the beginning of this video were taken on one of our few fine days over the past week and a half or so. We've had so much rain, hundreds of millimetres as far as I know. We live near Mount Elephant. Mount Elephant had over 200 millimetres. We may have had less than that, but there are lakes everywhere in our yard and in the driveway. We just had so much water. And of course, our rain tanks are absolutely full to overflowing, which is great because that's our only water for the house and for the garden. I've been exploring a bit more to do with the Gelli printing. I've been loving the process, and I will never ever give up my stitching, but I have done less stitching over the past 2 weeks or so than I normally do. However, all this is a means to an end, which I'll explain further along in the video. Of course, the Words 2026 project continues. I've been working on a block for one of my squares. We pull out the new word, of course, and I'll share with you the word from last week. Also, every video I share a featured photo from someone in the group who is working on the Words 2026 project with me. So I have a new one to share with you today. One of the things that I've been really inspired by, and which I mention in later parts of this video, is by ancient frescoes, mainly from Rome and particularly from Pompeii and the excavations there, which coincidentally use some of the same colours that I especially used initially in my Gelli printing. And when I was doing my prints, I really started to think about the fact that they were looking like weathered walls and ancient frescoes. I also had a bit of a look at binders as used traditionally in the past. For example, where the paint was mixed into the plaster to make it permanent so that it wouldn't disintegrate. Also tempera, which is using egg to mix with your paint, which was not as long lasting, I discovered, because that was something that I had been considering. So it's been a real lovely type of research to get into. Anything that's related to art, I think, is interesting for me anyway. So I hope you enjoy the video. I've certainly enjoyed putting it together. I've enjoyed very much doing some art every day, and I hope that you make time for yourself too, to be creative every day if you can. I finished the last length on the Red for Courage scroll, the section that I was working on, and I have measured it. Last time I wasn't sure, I guessed about 5 metres, I think. Well, it's actually 6.2 metres. So this is only probably a fifth of the whole scroll, a bit under a fifth. So, you know, I feel like I've done a lot, but it's actually, in the scheme of things, probably not all that much. I must say, though, the main part of the scroll does have everything basted down and it is joined together. But as I said last time, I may dismantle it somewhat just to make it easier to add all the embroidery. But anyway, I have finished embroidering this part of the scroll, which, as I said, is 6.2 metres. There are 45 of these squares on it. There are about 50 left in the box. So let's just round that up to 100. Which means that there are about 150 on the rest of the scroll. So it's getting there, and I've just had a break from it over the past week, except for finishing the last strip and joining it on. I came outside to video the scroll so far, and I forgot that I'd actually already embroidered these ones here at the end. So that's 6 more lengths that I've done, which are probably just under a metre each, which means that's another 6 or so metres. Plus this one I've just completed embroidering, which is 6.2, plus the main part of the scroll, which I haven't embroidered yet. So I'm actually further along than I thought, which is a nice surprise. I had done these other ones a while ago, and I found them in the box when I was getting the big scroll out. So that was a really nice surprise. I'll have to recalculate how much more I have to do with the embroidery now, but I am enjoying the process, so it doesn't really matter that much. But I feel like I really am getting somewhere now that I've discovered this. In my last video, I shared with you some of the jelly prints that I've been making and how I've made them into folios in the different batches that I did. So you follow a process with jelly printing if you are familiar with it, and you start and then you keep going with the paints that you've got and trying out different things, and you end up with quite a range of things just using the same colours and the same texturizing implements and so on. So I've actually done quite a bit more. These are the roll-offs of the first couple of batches, I think, which I printed over the top of. So it's the second layer using bubble wrap, and I'm not sure what else. I think it was only bubble wrap. Yes. And they will be very useful. I could do another layer over the top of them, or I could just use them as they are. That's another lot of roll-offs that I need to do something with. So they're just together there ready for whenever that is. I was very happy with this one. I felt that this looked like weathered walls or old frescoes, or ancient frescoes, I should say. And I just love that effect, and I think this is something that I seem to be naturally getting into. This was batch 8, and these were the positive prints which were left after you've done the negative prints. So what I did was I laid my foliage here, in this case again fishbone fern and eucalyptus, on the top of 2 colours, and I think that's Venetian red and that is French turquoise. Then I took the leaves off and put another piece of paper on it, and that's the print that I got. And what I've done is I've put them in pairs in the folio so you can see how they relate to each other. So this is actually the second print, or the positive print. That's the negative one. Here I use some lamandra leaves. Now we're back to fishbone and eucalyptus. So there's the negative print. And then lamandra and eucalyptus. And I really like this one as it is. What I do often is I print over the top, but I just felt, no, I think I'd like to save these. They just came up with so much detail. You can see the veins in the eucalyptus leaves and in the fishbone fern, and I just love that effect. So I'm going to keep those as they are. The first print, which was the positive print, I may do something over the top, but they'd also be useful as class samples because, as you know, I'm writing some tutorials about this process. So we'll just see what happens, but I do like these the way they are. These were just on printer paper. The others are on a kind of art paper, but I don't know what it is because it was given to me. One of the things I really loved doing was tissue paper prints, and I've been sharing these on social media, but I really love the effect of that. So using recycled packaging. These two I used cardboard masks, and they didn't quite turn out how I wanted them, so I may do more on those. But again, the same process and colours as I used in these, even though they look so different. This one, again, I thought reminded me of weathered walls and ancient frescoes. And I just really love how these turned out. I'm using a different medium here, and sometimes it separates. And at first I wasn't sure if that was what I wanted, but then I realised actually there's really an interesting effect with that. Here you can see my circles stencil, and here you can see corrugated cardboard. And I think they might be two of my favourite things to use. And I did ultramarine purple, orange ochre and Venetian red in the background. And then I did black and white for the overprinting. So that's 2 layers. And all of these were done in the same way. But, you know, I changed how I place things, where I put the texture stamps or stencils, how I arranged the colours. And sometimes I would run out of one colour, so I just used the 2 that were left. And still part of the same series. I tried lamandra as well, which I really like. I really like the effect of that. And I did press the leaves in a book overnight too, so that they would stay flat even as they dried out. And that really worked. These are the positive prints. And again, I've left them, as I did with the other ones I showed you, because I really like how they look. So we have eucalyptus and lamandra. And because there was still paint on the edges of the jelly plate, it actually looks a bit like a lino cut print. And I love that. That was unexpected. Lamandra and fishbone fern. Lamandra and fishbone fern again. Then I did some of the negative prints on tissue. And this is old dressmaker pattern tissue. So from sewing patterns from the Australian Home Journal. And they were incomplete. So they weren't useful as patterns. And I thought the tissue paper is wonderful to use. And I really like how they turned out too. The colours are much more muted. And then these are some more that I did in the same series. I had a bit less paint on the palette, so these are paler. And this one I had more paint. You can see again how the binder that I'm using is separating a little bit, but it actually makes an interesting effect. I've found that I have to leave it for a while once I've mixed it so it can settle down. But if I don't, then I get these lovely little spaces where it's separated. That one you can really see the ultramarine purple. Sometimes I change the colours as I go along too, if one runs out. That one looks as though it has a bit of gold on it. I'm actually going to look at getting a new laptop and printer. I think I might have mentioned it in my last video, so that I can scan high-resolution images of some of the best of these jelly plate prints, and they will be made available as high-res downloads for you to use either for your scrapbooking, your collage, or even to print on cloth, which takes me to the next part of this video. Once I've worked out which binder is best to use on cloth, I will be printing directly onto cloth in the same way as I'm doing it onto paper. But in the meantime, I also wanted to tell you about another way that you can get your designs onto cloth. And if you download my high-res images, which I plan to put up in my online shop, you'll be able to print them onto cloth yourself using your inkjet printer. So this was the first image that I tried. And I did this on silk organza. You can buy this in packs. I think there are 5 in a pack, and it works out at between $25 to $30 a pack. So they're about, $5 or $6 each. per printout. But it just is a beautiful effect, and I can just imagine this being used in textile art, overlaid over something else maybe, or just on white. But I love how that has come out. The colour is a little bit more muted than it is in the original, but that's part of the effect, I think, especially on the organza. So I think the brand is Extravaganza that I got this from. It's silk organza. This was the other one that I tried, just with my inkjet printer. And this is onto silk, so it's not as transparent as organza is, but it is still very light. Both of them come stuck onto this piece of paper so that it will feed through your printer without any problems. And then once you've printed it, you just peel it off. So if you compare it to the original, it's not too much of a difference, I think. Plus you have the sheen of the silk, which is lovely on this. Just to take you through the types of fabrics that I'm printing on, this is the Extravaganza one that I told you about. They are inkjet printable, semi-transparent silk sheets. And I love the fact that they are silk. Silk is so beautiful to work with. This one is the silk itself, and again, lots of ideas for how to use it on the pack and also instructions. And these are just cotton, sort of like a fine calico. This is a different brand. This is Matilda's own. These are both jacquard. I had to buy them online because we don't live near a city. They do sell them in Launceston at one of the stores that specialises in arts and crafts and also homewares called Spotlight. So that's the easiest way for me to get them if I'm in Launceston, but if I'm not, it's easier for me to order them online. So it might give you some ideas about using your own art as well. And photographs, being able to print them directly onto fabric like this can be very, very handy. These are some Gelli prints that I've done in the last couple of days. I'm going for particular effects, so it might seem like I'm doing a lot, and maybe even that I might be putting stitching on the back burner, but I'm really not. Stitching and fabric are always in the back of my mind. I do stitch with paper also, so it doesn't worry me that most of these are on paper, but my aim is to find ways to use them on cloth and to print directly onto cloth. Because I'm using natural mediums or natural media, I have to really make sure that it will be the kind of binder that will work on cloth and be permanent. So I'm in the research phase and the experimentation phase. Each time I do a batch of printing, I write down what I've done so that when I'm teaching, I can remember and I can show you examples. These two don't have a folio yet. I have enough cardboard left to make them into folios, but at the moment they're just held together with clamps. This one, I tried some different colours. Sometimes you get used to certain colours because you tend to like them, but I was challenging myself to try some different colours. So I used one called Terra Verte, which is this green, and orange ochre, which I've used before, and raw sienna, which I hadn't used before. And then for the second layer, I used purple ochre with a little bit of ultramarine purple mixed in and burnt umber. It made them very dark, and at first I thought, oh no, is this what I want? But now I'm really, really pleased with them. So again, I've used similar foliage, but I've changed the colours. These were originally roll-off sheets. So the first layer is the roll-offs from the roller that you use to roll out the paints on the plate. And the second layer are positive prints. And I took off the negative prints first on another sheet of paper. And I really like the way the Lamandra prints on these. It's just got a lovely swirly kind of a shape. Weathered walls, ancient frescoes. I'm just loving it. And when I looked at the ones that I could find online, a lot of them are using these sorts of Venetian reds, the French turquoise, the greens, and sort of the ochre colours, because of course they were the ones that they could access because they're natural and they're found in the ground. Then we come to the ones where I took the first print off. So that was the negative print, which left white spaces, and then I've printed over the top of it. And I think I used raw sienna and orange ochre for the second layer for these. You can see a little bit of the green in the background there. So these are also 2 layers, look very different to the first section, but still part of the process because they were the first print I took, and then I overprinted the others with the positives from those negative ones. This is a batch that I did yesterday, and I was really inspired by Klimt and his landscapes. I saw a really lovely video, and if I think of it, I'll leave the link below, of someone who did a bit of a study of Klimt's landscapes. And they were done in the same style as the ones with the figures and the very famous one, of course, with the robe. This one accidentally came out a lot like some of his landscapes, especially the backgrounds or the areas where there were lots of leaves or flowers. And that was because the paint separated, because I didn't wait long enough for the binder. I also used some copper mica, and the copper mica actually reflects some of the metallic colours that he used in his paintings. So these two look like a dense forest. I did use a masking technique with strips of brown paper. So I'll just go back to the other two. What I did was I laid 2 strips of brown paper on top of the background paint. So I did the brilliant yellow, terra verte and Venetian red first, then laid the strips of paper, then did a positive print of a fern and some casuarina. And so it looks a bit like tree trunks and the foliage as well. So that was more like what I was trying to get. And I like to try to get a combination of both of these techniques or both of these effects. So I'm going to try again. I've written some notes to help me to do that, I hope. But as I said, you know, it's a lot of experimenting. I want to be able to know what I'm doing before I start teaching it. And also because earth paints and the natural binders are a totally different ballgame compared to using just normal acrylic paints and so on, I need to know what I'm doing before I teach it. I hope you're enjoying the journey. You're actually getting some of the background to the tutorials and a bit of extra information. The other thing I wanted to tell you is that I am now an affiliate member of Natural Earth Paints. You would have noticed the logo on top of the title page of this video, and it's all been confirmed. I've done all the paperwork that I need to do, which wasn't very much. And now, as an affiliate, if you buy earth paints through the link that I share below this video, you will help me earn a little commission from each of the sales. So I really hope you would like to try using the earth paints. It's really lovely to have a process and materials which is less harmful to the environment than all the acrylic paints and binders that we normally use. It's very difficult sometimes to find substitutes, and I'm so glad that I've been able to find some substitutes, and just need to fine-tune the binder side of things, and we'll be ready to roll, which is very exciting. I'm afraid that every time I do jelly printing, I take over the kitchen. This is one end of the kitchen table, but I have everything on a tray or easily stackable so that I can clear it pretty quickly, which I've been doing lately because we have a friend staying with us. But I just wanted to show you a couple of things. One is some bubble wrap saved from packaging, which I've been using for getting textures onto the plate. Here I've got strips of paper, brown paper, some of the plants that I've been using that I've foraged around the house. I have got more colours now. They were still in sachets, but I bought some more jars and I've put them into the jars so they're easier to use. These are some of the stamps and stencils that I've been using. Some of them I've had for a very long time. This one is one that I carved for a journal and a quilt that I made, which went to Houston in Texas as part of a group exhibition with Lisa Walton, who's an Australian textile artist. Corrugated cardboard for getting textures into the paint. Two of my favourite stencils, and this round one, which I hadn't used before I started the Gelli printing, and it's proved to be really, really useful. The other thing that I've done, because I was mixing these in disposable cups, even though they were biodegradable, I just didn't like the idea of having to reuse things and then throw them out, even though they could be recycled. So what I did was I bought myself a paint palette for mixing the paints because they are earth pigments, and I also got a set of palette knives for mixing the paints. So I can now mix the powdered pigments with the binder on top of the palette, and it makes it much easier, and I can just use up all the paint till it's done and then clean the palette down. The term creative block is a term that artists use sometimes when they get stuck and don't know what to do for their next piece of art. And I must say that it did strike me for a few days over this past week. I had put together this block featuring my portion square, and I was very happy with it, but I didn't know what to do next. I have been watching some of the famous artists from the early 1900s, people such as Kandinsky and Matisse, who are artists that I particularly like. I also saw one about Paul Klee, which I really felt inspired by, and also Klimt. But that wasn't where my inspiration came from in the end. It was another video that I watched where there was an introduction. I don't remember what the artist or the art practice which was being demonstrated, but I remember that she said, instead of looking at Pinterest and YouTube, if you run out of ideas, look at your own work. Go back through your work from the past and see what inspired you at the time and whether it might inspire you again and whether you can take it further. And I thought that was such good advice. So I actually pulled out my other blocks, and one of them in particular inspired me as to what to do next. These are the other blocks that I've done, 15 altogether, and I was leafing through them, and I only had to go this far, which was the one for overflow. And I really liked what I did there to represent the water or the river. So in the end, that's what, well, almost immediately, that was the one that inspired me as to what to do next. I got out a few materials that were similar. This is a cotton gauze, which has been naturally dyed. This is some indigo dyed linen, which I also used in the square. Some gold ribbon, which was saved from a gift or something like that. And then I couched down some vintage thread, which looks like silk, but is actually rayon. And then I thought, yes, now I know where I'm going to go. And when I was going through my tin of small scraps, I also found leftover strips of the fabric designed in Tasmania by the spotted quoll, which featured gum leaves. And most of them only had part of a gum leaf. So I thought, what if I did a row of partial gum leaves at the bottom? So I've pinned them in place, ready to stitch. I'll invisibly base them first, and then I'll decide how to embroider them. But I feel like I'm now through the creative block and things are on a roll again. The latest word for Words 2026 was gap. So quite a simple and short little word compared to some of the ones that we've pulled out. I almost was inspired straight away instead of having to wait for a few days before inspiration struck me. So I'll just get it out and show you. I found this little square very satisfying to do, partly because it happened so quickly. I had pre-collaged the background, which I shared either in the last video or the one before, and that gave me a head start. And all I did really was add these two strips onto it. I thought maybe they can be saplings, and I can do a partially built spider web in between. So it's as if a spider was just starting to make his web and getting the foundation done. And then this eucalyptus leaf fell out of the sky or off a tree and landed smack in the middle of his web before he'd even finished. And someone commented about minuscule underneath my Instagram post about this. And we do actually really enjoy the minuscule series, which is a French series about insects and the different characters and personalities that they have that have been invented for this series. It's very, very humorous, really well done, and very enjoyable if you haven't seen them as yet. Just look up minuscule on YouTube and you'll find them. We love them. So I guess this was inspired by minuscule, even though I hadn't really thought about it while I was working on it. I just used pearl cotton in a fairly random way to make the web. Feather stitch with French knots on the saplings. This one I didn't do French knots because I've used a silk tape, so I felt that was enough. This is a pearl cotton as well. The leaf was cut from some fabric from the spotted quoll again, and then I embroidered over the top with some stranded cotton in an orange colour. I did a little bit of grass down at the bottom, and I felt that it was finished, so it really didn't take me very long to do. We're going to pull out this week's word, which is week 22 for Words 2026. So I'll just have a little feel, shuffle it around a little bit, and pull one out. Do I have just one or do I have two? I think I only have one, so let's turn it over. Well, that will be quite interesting to do, won't it? Pear. This is pear as in a pair of gloves or a pair of shoes, not the pear that you eat. So again, yes, a pair of shoes, a pair of gloves, as I said. Do you say glasses are a pair of glasses? I'm not really sure. Pairs as in relationships, pairs as in animals, thinking of the animals that went in 2 by 2 into Noah's Ark. It could be also related to your garden. It might be a pair of plants that you especially like, a pair of trees that are at your gateway, a pair of flower pots that sit outside your front door. So you can be quite decorative with this, or you can be a little bit more abstract, whatever you feel you would like to do.